Vera Whitmore spent her childhood in a sunlit townhouse on Beacon Street, the kind of place where generations of money had settled into the walls like a silent set of rules. Her mother, Evelyn, upheld those rules with precision, her voice always measured, her posture always perfect, her expectations always hovering just high enough to shape Vera's entire world. Jonathan, her father, was softer, the sort of man who hid his concern behind gentle smiles and let his wife define the structure of their lives. He loved his daughter deeply, but conflict made him retreat. Evelyn, therefore, became the force that shaped Vera's days. Despite the polished order of her upbringing, Vera was a lonely child. Tutors rotated through the house. Music lessons filled her afternoons. Her toys were beautiful but untouched, arranged more for decoration than play. And then, one afternoon, everything shifted when she wandered past the service entrance and found a girl sitting on the back steps, knees scraped, shoes worn, hair tied in a messy knot. Shelby Moore. She was the daughter of a woman who cleaned homes along the Boston outskirts, including the Whitmores during the busy season. Shelby's mother would drop her off during long shifts, hoping the child would stay out of the way. But Shelby never stayed anywhere she was told. She spoke to Vera first. "You look bored," she said simply, as if pointing out the weather. Vera, startled by the bluntness, nodded. "I guess I am." That was all it took. Within minutes they were sitting together, inventing stories, playing with chalk, sharing secrets in the quiet corners of the property. Their friendship formed quickly, naturally, two children drawn together, not by similarities, but by the way they filled the empty spaces in each other's lives. But joy in the Whitmore house never lasted long without scrutiny. The first time Evelyn saw them together, she froze in the doorway. Her eyes flicked from her daughter's spotless dress to Shelby's patched jeans, and the disapproval radiated instantly. She called for the housekeeper, Mrs. Elaine Foster, who hurried in with an apologetic expression, already anticipating the storm. "I leave for 10 minutes," Evelyn whispered sharply, "and this is what happens. A Whitmore child sitting on the ground like this." Shelby lowered her head, but Vera stepped forward as if to shield her. Evelyn's glare cut straight through her attempt. Mrs. Foster tried to intervene, apologizing, explaining, but Evelyn dismissed her with a wave of her hand. She forbade the girls from playing together again, making it clear that certain boundaries existed for a reason, boundaries she expected her daughter to respect. But children don't understand boundaries carved by class or pride. They found ways to meet in secret, in the alley behind the townhouse, at the park 2 blocks away, once even in the Whitmore's basement when Mrs. Foster took pity on them. Each stolen moment strengthened their bond. 3 years later, Vera learned what real loss felt like. Shelby stopped coming to the house. Days passed, then weeks. Finally, Mrs. Foster, her eyes heavy with sympathy, told her the truth. Shelby's parents had lost custody. Too many reports of neglect. Too many nights without food. Shelby had been taken by the state and placed in a group home in Worcester, over an hour away. The news hollowed Vera in a way she didn't have words for. She begged her parents to take her to see Shelby. Jonathan hesitated, then agreed quietly behind Evelyn's back. They made the drive on a cold Saturday, the sky a muted gray that felt too fitting. When Shelby saw her, she ran straight into her arms. The goodbye that followed was not dramatic, no wailing, no clinging, but the soft, trembling hug between two children who understood loss too early. On the ride home, Vera pressed her forehead to the window, silent. A fragile dependence had taken root. Shelby had become her first real friend, the anchor in her lonely world. Losing her carved a scar that would shape the years to come. Jonathan Whitmore was not a rebellious man by nature, but in the months after Shelby's removal, something in him shifted. He watched his daughter fade, her laughter thinning, her shoulders folding inward as if she were bracing against something no one else could see. The Whitmore home, normally polished and quiet, felt weighed down by her silence. And each time Evelyn dismissed Vera's grief as childish attachment, Jonathan's patience wore thinner. One evening, after Vera had gone to bed, he sat across from Elaine Foster at the kitchen table. The housekeeper hesitated at first. Evelyn had made her position painfully clear, but Jonathan's gentle urgency convinced her. Together they made calls, searched state listings, pieced together information from social workers and mutual acquaintances. Within a week, they found the youth center in Worcester, where Shelby had been placed. Jonathan didn't tell Evelyn. He simply told Vera they were going for a drive. The youth center was a squat, older building beside a chain-link fence. Children played in a yard that looked more like a repurposed parking lot. A staff member escorted them inside, past classrooms converted from storage rooms and hallways with scuffed floors. It all felt foreign to Vera, loud, chaotic, stripped of the softness she took for granted. But Shelby was exactly the same. She ran to Vera with enough force to almost knock her over. For a moment they clung to each other, two worlds colliding with the kind of clarity only children possess. Shelby talked fast, breathless, filling Vera in on her new routine. The crowded dorm rooms, the strict schedules. There were parts she clearly hated, others she tried to pretend were fine. Vera didn't interrupt. She simply listened, absorbing every detail. During visiting hours, they sat beneath a window where a sliver of sunlight cut across the worn table. Shelby braided Vera's hair while telling a story about a girl in her unit who sleepwalked into the cafeteria. Vera told her about a new literature tutor who read poems. Too dramatically. They laughed until one of the staff members gently reminded them their time was almost up. When Vera returned to Boston that afternoon, something inside her had changed. She understood, in a way she never had before, how wildly different their lives were. Shelby's world felt fragile, uncertain, and unfair, and Vera's instinctive response was loyalty, protective loyalty. Evelyn noticed the shift immediately. She questioned the outing, demanded details, and bristled when Jonathan refused to justify himself. "We cannot encourage attachments that complicate her future," she snapped. Jonathan, rarely confrontational, stood his ground. "Her future will be just fine if she learns compassion, something we could use more of in this house." It was the closest they had come to a true argument in years. Evelyn retreated to her room with a stiff silence that lingered for days. But Vera didn't care. All she could think about was Shelby. Jonathan arranged regular weekend visits, pretending they were educational trips whenever Evelyn asked. Elaine quietly covered for them, offering distracted explanations that Evelyn never fully believed, but eventually stopped questioning. Those visits became the heartbeat of Vera's adolescence. Simple, innocent moments that shaped everything she would later stand for. They played cards in the rec room, exchanged letters between visits, whispered hopes for the future under the noisy hum of the center's fluorescent lights. Shelby taught Vera to question privilege. Vera taught Shelby to believe in possibility. Their friendship no longer felt like something small and childish. It felt formative, something that grew roots deep enough to weather the storms neither of them yet knew were coming. When Vera turned 15, she no longer needed Jonathan to drive her to Worcester. She had learned the bus route by heart. Back Bay to the station outside the youth center. A 40-minute trip she protected like a secret ritual. That April afternoon, the air was warm, almost summery, and she carried a small wrapped box in her backpack. Shelby's birthday wasn't until the next day, but visiting hours fell on a Friday and Vera couldn't wait. Shelby met her at the door, hair still damp from chores, cheeks flushed with excitement. They walked out to the yard, where a crooked oak tree cast a long shadow across the cracked pavement. Vera sat with her backpack against her legs, pretending she wasn't vibrating with anticipation. "Okay," Shelby said, crossing her arms dramatically. What did you bring? Vera handed her the box. Shelby hesitated. If it's expensive, I'm not taking it. It's not, Vera insisted. Just open it. Shelby tore the paper, lifted the lid and froze. A simple flip phone lay inside, silver, outdated by Boston standards, but perfectly functional. Vera, she breathed, I can't. You can. We'll talk every night. I already set it up. See? My number's the first one. Shelby blinked hard and swallowed, clearly overwhelmed. But before she could respond, a voice drifted down from above them. Well, Boston royalty blesses us again. Both girls looked up. A boy about 16 lounged across a thick branch of the oak tree, one leg dangling. Dark eyes, sun-bleached hair, a cocky grin that made something in Vera tighten. He looked like someone who lived outside rules, someone who climbed structures simply because he felt like it. Shelby groaned. Ignore him. That's Parker Hayes. He's always like this. Parker waved lazily. Didn't know today was Christmas. Vera narrowed her eyes. It's a birthday. Ooh, he said, clutching his chest. My mistake. Happy birthday, Shelby. Congrats on the flip phone. Very retro. Shelby shot Vera a warning look, but Vera was already standing. You know, she said, you could say nothing instead of being rude. Parker smirked. And miss the entertainment? Not a chance. Normally, Vera would have walked away. But something about him, his smugness, his comfort in a place Shelby struggled daily to survive, made her reckless. Come down here, she demanded. Nope. If you want to talk, climb up. Shelby tugged Vera's sleeve. Don't. He's an idiot. And that tree's a disaster. But Vera had spent years under Evelyn's regime of politeness, control, and perfect posture. She was tired of feeling helpless, tired of boys like Parker assuming they could mock her life without knowing anything about it. So she grabbed a low branch. Her foot slipped at first, but she steadied herself. She climbed another step, then another, ignoring the way her stomach lurched. Heights had always terrified her, the clean, dizzying drop, the way gravity tugged her backward, but pride pushed her higher. Parker's smirk faltered. Hey, stop. I was joking. Too late, Vera muttered, reaching for the branch just below his. Her fingers brushed it. Then her shoe slid on the bark. The world tilted. She heard Shelby scream, her own breath tearing from her chest, the sharp crack of branches snapping. Then she hit the ground, a white-hot bolt shot through her leg. Her arm throbbed with a nauseating pulse. Pain swallowed everything. Parker was on the ground a moment later, kneeling beside her, panic replacing the arrogance. Don't move, he said, voice shaking. I've got you. He scooped her up, not effortlessly but carefully, and sprinted toward the entrance. Staff rushed out, shocked, circling her, asking questions she couldn't answer through the pain. Parker leaned close to Shelby. Tree branch broke, he whispered. She wasn't supposed to climb. Just nod. Shelby nodded, trembling. When they loaded Vera into the ambulance, she caught one last glimpse of Parker standing on the curb, hands on his head, expression torn between guilt and something else, something she would later recognize as the very beginning of devotion. Massachusetts General Hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and overbrewed coffee, a scent that settled into Vera's memory long before she could walk again. She spent her first days drifting in and out of medication-blurred sleep, waking to the rigid ache in her splinted leg, the dull throb in her arm, and the unsettling quiet of the trauma ward. Her bed was pushed near a window overlooking Cambridge Street. The other beds held patients much older than she was, two with external fixators, one grandmotherly woman recovering with equal parts humor and exasperation. By the fourth evening, she had learned the rhythms of the ward. Nurses changed shifts at 7. The hall lights dimmed at 8, and after 9, the world seemed to fall into a thick, fatigued hush, which was exactly when Parker Hayes appeared. The first night, she thought she was imagining things. A faint tapping at the window cut through the hum of machines. Then his face appeared in the square of glass, grinning, breath fogging the pane, a wildflower clenched between his teeth. Vera blinked. "You can't be serious." He mouthed, "Open up." She pointed to her casted arm. He exaggerated a gesture. "Use the other one." Against all logic, she reached over and unlatched the window. A rush of evening air slipped into the room, carrying city noise, horns, footsteps, a siren somewhere in the distance. Parker climbed in with surprising grace, landing lightly beside her bed. "I brought something," he announced, pulling the small flower from behind his ear. It was wilted on one side, the stem crooked. "It looks half dead," she said. "So am I most mornings. It's relatable." Despite herself, she laughed and immediately winced at the ache in her ribs. But Parker's grin widened, as if the sound alone was worth the climb. Night after night he returned. Sometimes he carried flowers he'd plucked from the hospital grounds, dandelions, clovers, occasionally a tulip that looked suspiciously stolen. Other times he arrived empty-handed, breathless from climbing the service ledge, hair wind-tangled, cheeks flushed from the cold. Their conversations were messy, mismatched, and strangely effortless. He teased her about being Boston royalty, while she corrected his grammar. She told him about orchestra rehearsals and the suffocating expectations of Back Bay society. He told her about the group home he'd lived in before Worcester, the part-time jobs he cycled through, and the strange freedom that came from having no one expect anything from him at all. Under the hospital's dim lights, without Evelyn's scrutiny or the gossip of Beacon Hill's dinner parties, Vera felt strangely unarmored. Parker didn't care about her last name, her father's business connections, or the events she was groomed to attend. He talked to her, not the Whitmore heiress, not the polished daughter of 2 power players, but to the girl stuck in a hospital bed, trying not to cry every time she shifted her weight. And she found herself talking back, honestly, openly. He made her laugh in ways she had not laughed since Shelby was taken away. He listened, brow furrowed. When she confessed she feared going home, not because of the pain, but because of the loneliness waiting for her there. And sometimes, when the ward grew quiet enough that even the machines settled into a soft hum, he let slip pieces of his fears too. Not big declarations. Parker never spoke that directly, but the kind of half-admitted truths that told her more than the words themselves. On the 10th night, the older woman across the room gave Vera a knowing smile as Parker slipped back out the window. "Looks like you've got company," she whispered. Vera blushed, but the warmth in her chest spread slowly, quietly, something tender blooming beneath the bruises. Shelby had once been her emotional anchor, the person who made the world feel bearable. Now, unexpectedly, Parker Hayes was beginning to take that place. Vera's cast itched constantly, and her physical therapists were relentless, but the long days at Massachusetts General didn't feel lonely anymore. Parker came almost every evening, slipping through the window with the instinctive ease of someone who had spent his life navigating locked spaces and narrow escapes. The nurses either never noticed or pretended not to. The older woman across the ward kept giving Vera conspiratorial winks. One night, when rain streaked the window and Parker arrived soaked through, Vera handed him one of the hospital blankets. For once, he didn't joke. He sat beside her bed, damp hair dripping onto the sheet, hands restless in his lap. "You okay?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then exhaled through his nose, a shaky, reluctant breath. "You keep telling me things about your life. I should probably tell you something too." Vera shifted, careful of her leg. "Only if you want to." Parker stared at the floor for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was stripped of bravado. "My father My biological father never wanted kids. When I was born, he made sure everyone knew it. He drank, got meaner when he did, and one day he sold our apartment. Just sold it. Took the money and left my mom and me with nothing. Vera's chest tightened. He was gone for years. My mom and I lived with her boyfriend. He wasn't my real dad, but he treated me like I mattered. He taught me how to fix things, how to ride a bike, how to be decent. But when my biological father came back demanding money, everything went to hell. Parker rubbed his palms together, eyes glassy but distant, like he was watching an old film of his life. My mom told him to leave. He pushed her, hard. She fell down the stairs. She never got back up. His jaw clenched. Her boyfriend, my stepdad, lost it, attacked him. And guess who went to prison? The one who tried to protect us. Vera felt a sharp, helpless ache. She wanted to reach for his hand, but didn't know if she should. So after that, he continued, voice thin, the foster system got me. Different homes, different rules. Doesn't matter which ones were good or bad. None of them were home. He finally looked up. The vulnerability there was raw, unguarded. You're the only person who's ever asked. Vera's eyes burned. Carefully, she placed her uninjured hand over his. I'm glad you told me, and I'm not going anywhere. Parker gave a shaky laugh, soft, disbelieving. Yeah, well, don't make promises you can't keep. But she wasn't joking. She felt it, like the fragile beginnings of something too precious to name. As the weeks passed, Vera's body healed slowly, and her connection with Parker deepened quickly. Their conversations slipped into a kind of intimacy neither of them understood yet. Whispers in the dim light, quiet laughter over hospital pudding cups, long stretches where they didn't need words at all. Sometimes Parker rested his forehead against her uninjured shoulder while she traced the freckles along his wrist. Sometimes she caught him watching her as if memorizing every expression, afraid she might disappear. On the afternoon before her discharge, he climbed in through the window carrying no flowers, no jokes, just a strange stillness in his eyes. You're leaving tomorrow, he murmured. I know, she whispered. He sat beside her, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Vera reached up, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, and Parker leaned in as if drawn by something inevitable. Their lips met, soft, hesitant, trembling with every unspoken emotion between them. Her heart fluttered wildly. His hand cupped her cheek with a tenderness that contradicted every hardship he'd lived through. When they finally pulled apart, Parker rested his forehead against hers. We'll stay in touch, she said. I promise. This time he didn't doubt her. He only nodded, eyes warm with a fragile hope he rarely allowed himself to feel. And for the first time since her fall, Vera wasn't afraid of going home. Not when she knew Parker Hayes would still be in her world. By the time Vera turned 19, Boston had become both familiar and suffocating. She spent her days studying at a private conservatory and her afternoons wandering the public garden or the walking paths around Beacon Hill. She told herself she had moved on, that life had settled into predictable, polished rhythms. But part of her had been waiting, quietly, relentlessly. That waiting ended on an early summer afternoon in Boston Common. She was reading beneath an old elm when the low rumble of a motorcycle drew her eyes upward. The rider slowed, removed his helmet, and shook out sun-caught brown hair. The moment Parker Hayes smiled, something inside her chest gave way. He was taller now, shoulders broader, confidence settling over him with ease rather than rebellion. The boy who once climbed hospital windows was now a man who carried himself like he had survived more than most people guessed, and refused to apologize for it. "Miss me?" he asked, voice warm with the same teasing lilt she remembered. Vera didn't answer. She threw her arms around him, caste and hospital memories flooding back like a forgotten song. Parker laughed, the sound rough and real, and lifted her off the ground. They spent hours walking through Boston Common, weaving between children chasing pigeons and street musicians playing saxophone near the frog pond. Everything they had promised years ago resurfaced naturally. Unfinished sentences, small inside jokes, the quiet pull that had never disappeared. By evening, sitting on a bench as the sky dimmed violet, Parker took her hand. "When you're 21, he said softly, "I want us to get married. No secrets, no pauses, just you and me." Vera's heart raced. She nodded without hesitation. Yes, it should have been the happiest moment of her young adulthood. But Shelby Moore had been waiting too, just not for joy. Shelby had changed over the years in ways Vera struggled to understand. She was sharper now, moodier, her experiences in the foster system leaving invisible fractures. When Vera told her about Parker's return, Shelby reacted first with silence, then with a trembling confession. "I've loved him since we were kids," she whispered, voice breaking. "He was the only one who cared when no one else did. And now you're taking him too. Just like everything else." Vera froze. "Shelby, I never knew." "It doesn't matter," Shelby snapped. "It always ends the same. You get the good things. I get what's left." Before Vera could process the hurt behind the words, Shelby stormed out, straight into a decision that would unravel everything. Out of jealousy, desperation, or maybe a confused blend of both, Shelby contacted Evelyn Whitmore. She told her that Parker was dangerous, violent, someone who would drag Vera down and ruin the Whitmore name. She exaggerated fragments of truth from Parker's past, his group home transitions, his lack of family support, warping them into something sinister. Evelyn, who had always viewed the world through risk and reputation, reacted exactly as Shelby anticipated, with immediate alarm. Jonathan's response was quieter, but far more consequential. He hired private investigators, instructing them to find anything that might protect Vera. What came back were reports filled with stark summaries: Parker's foster placements, the prison record of the stepfather he adored, and the chaotic circumstances surrounding his mother's death. Jonathan didn't see the nuance. He saw danger. He saw instability. He saw a threat to his daughter. And without speaking to Parker, or allowing Vera the chance to explain, he began quietly planning how to separate them. The reunion that had felt like destiny was now shadowed by a storm none of them saw coming. The night everything collapsed began quietly, too quietly for Vera to suspect anything was wrong. She slipped out of the back bay townhouse just after 10, heart fluttering with anticipation as she made her way toward Commonwealth Avenue, where Parker waited with his motorcycle beneath a street lamp. They had planned nothing extravagant, just a long ride along the Charles, maybe a late-night diner, and the thrill of being together without glances, rules, or questions. But she never reached him. Halfway down the block, a black SUV pulled alongside the curb, its rear door swinging open before she even realized it was stopping. Two men stepped out, suits, earpieces, the kind Jonathan hired for discreet security. Before she could react, one grabbed her arm and the other blocked her escape. "Miss Whitmore," the taller one said, tone controlled, "your father needs you to come with us." "No, wait, stop." Vera struggled, panic rising sharply. "Let me go." "I have to." Her protest was cut short as the men lifted her off her feet and ushered her into the SUV with mechanical efficiency. The door slammed shut. Locks clicked. The engine surged forward. She lunged toward the window, just in time to see Parker running full speed down the street, shouting her name. His helmet fell from his hand, rolling across the pavement. He sprinted desperately, closing the distance, but the SUV accelerated, swallowing the length of the block in seconds. "Parker! Parker!" Her voice cracked against the glass. He kept running until he couldn't, until his figure blurred into the streetlights and finally disappeared behind the line of brownstones. Vera slammed her fists against the window, sobbing. "Turn around. Please turn around. The guard beside her remained stone-faced. Your father's orders, ma'am. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She felt 13 again, powerless beneath the weight of decisions made above her head, suffocating inside a life she hadn't chosen. They drove straight to Logan International Airport. Jonathan was waiting inside a private terminal, posture rigid, expression carrying a fear he refused to show. The moment Vera saw him, the shock turned to fury. How could you? She choked out. You kidnapped me. Jonathan didn't flinch. I protected you. That's not protection. You dragged me away from the only person You're going to Paris, he said sharply, cutting her off. A specialized study program. You'll stay with your aunt in the 7th arrondissement. You'll finish 2 years abroad. You'll forget this boy. Forget him. Vera's voice cracked. You don't get to decide that. Jonathan stepped closer, lowering his voice to something darker, more deliberate. If you refuse, I will ensure that boy never finds work, never gets into a program, and never recovers from the doors I will close. You know what the Whitmore name can do. Don't make me use it. Her breath stopped. It wasn't just control. It was a threat, a weapon forged from privilege. She felt her knees weaken, her heartbeat slamming painfully against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to fight, to run, to defy him. But Parker's life, his future, hung in the air like something fragile enough to crush with a whisper. Her hands trembled. Please don't hurt him. Then get on the plane. And so she did. The flight to Paris was a silent freefall. The lights outside the window blurred into streaks as she stared without seeing, tears drying on her cheeks. Her phone had been confiscated, her passport held by staff. There was no way to call Parker, no way to warn Shelby, no way to tell anyone what truly happened. She arrived in France exhausted, terrified, and emotionally hollow. Her aunt greeted her warmly, unaware of the coercion woven into her arrival. The program was prestigious, the apartment beautiful. The streets filled with possibility, but none of it mattered. For the first time in her life, Vera Whitmore felt truly alone. In a foreign country, cut off from everything she loved, a ghost of the girl who once kissed a boy in a hospital room and believed promises could hold against the world. And somewhere in Boston, Parker Hayes was left standing in an empty street, wondering why she never came back. Paris should have been beautiful. People spoke of it like a dream. Golden light on the Seine, cafes blooming with conversation, the soft romance of a city built for wanderers. But for Vera, the world narrowed to a single small room in her aunt's apartment near Rue Claire, where she lay awake night after night staring at the pale ceiling, gripping her phone as though willing it to break the silence Jonathan had forced upon her. For days, her messages to Parker sat unsent. Trapped behind the foreign SIM card she wasn't allowed to change, behind her aunt's insistence that she focus on her studies, behind Jonathan's calculated isolation. Every morning, she typed new ones, small ones, desperate ones, long-spilling ones she immediately deleted. Every night, she tried again. I didn't leave you. Please pick up. I'm safe. Are you? Parker, please don't think I abandoned you. Then, one afternoon, without warning, her phone buzzed violently, delivering all 7 days of unsent messages at once. She gasped, clutching the device like it had come alive. A minute later, a new notification arrived. Unknown number. He's moved on. Stop embarrassing yourself. Before she could process it, another image downloaded. Then another. Photos. Sharp, clear, unmistakable. Parker and Shelby. In a bed, his arm around her, her face against his chest. Both asleep. The room around Vera tilted. Her breath vanished. She kept shaking her head as if the motion alone could reject reality. No, this isn't real. Shelby wouldn't, he wouldn't. Her voice cracked, swallowed by the quiet walls of the Paris apartment. Another message arrived. Unknown number. They've been together for weeks. Let him go. Her phone slipped from her hand. She felt something inside her collapse, something delicate and warm and tied to a boy who once climbed through her hospital window with wildflowers. She pressed a hand to her chest, but nothing eased the pressure building there. Rising like water, she couldn't escape. Her aunt found her unconscious on the bedroom floor. Vera awoke in a small private clinic on the left bank, the sterile scent of antiseptic oddly familiar. A doctor spoke softly to her in French-accented English, choosing his words with clinical care. There was too much stress on your system. You were several weeks pregnant, he paused, and the pregnancy could not be saved. Pregnant. She hadn't known, and now she never would. Her mind couldn't hold the grief all at once. It scattered into fragments. Parker's smile, their kiss in the hospital room, the feel of his hand around hers, promises whispered in late-night Boston air, each one cutting like glass. The following weeks passed in a haze. Her aunt tried to comfort her, but Vera felt unreachable, sealed inside a grief that no one else could see. She finished the program because she was expected to. She returned home because Jonathan insisted. She spoke to no one about the pregnancy, not even Shelby, who stopped answering messages entirely. Back in Boston, the townhouse felt cold, cavernous. She moved through rooms without inhabiting them, slept without resting, ate without tasting. Her world shrank to muted colors and quiet routines. And then 6 years disappeared. Not dramatically, not all at once. They slipped through her fingers in a blur of unfinished degrees, polite social obligations, therapy sessions she stopped attending, and mornings when she could barely get out of bed. People called her reserved, disciplined, elegant, never guessing the emptiness stitched into her every breath. Until one day, walking through a parking lot outside a cafe on Tremont Street, Vera heard the low, smooth growl of an engine. A woman, mid-30s, tattoos, wind-cut hair, swung her leg over a shimmering, black motorcycle. For the first time in years, something stirred in Vera's chest. Freedom. Raw, unrestrained, unpolished freedom. Nice bike, she said quietly. The woman smiled. You ride. Vera hesitated, then lied. Not yet. 3 weeks later, she bought her first motorcycle, against Evelyn's wishes, against every rule she had ever obeyed. When she wrapped her hands around the handlebars and felt the machine thrum beneath her, the emptiness didn't vanish, but it cracked, just enough for air to slip in. By her mid-20s, Vera Whitmore lived in a small converted loft in Somerville, far from Back Bay, far from expectations, far from the family name that once defined her entire existence. She worked long hours, rode her motorcycle whenever she needed to breathe, and avoided any conversations with her parents that went beyond the polite minimum. Years of resentment sat between them like an unlit fuse, but the truth had weight, and it pressed harder with each passing month. One gray afternoon, after another night spent unable to sleep, Vera drove to her parents' townhouse without warning. She walked through the door before anyone could stop her, her boots echoing sharply across the marble floor. Jonathan appeared in the foyer, startled by the abruptness in her expression. We need to talk, she said. No pleasantries, no hesitation. Jonathan swallowed. Vera, this isn't. What did you do to him? Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from controlled fury. To Parker. I know you interfered, but how far did you go? The color drained from his face. For years he had hidden behind the shield of protection, behind rationalizations crafted to soothe himself. But now, confronted by the daughter he loved yet never truly understood, the shield cracked. Vera! He rubbed his forehead with a shaking hand. There were concerns, reports. He had a record. Don't lie to me, she said sharply. You created that record. Silence thickened the room. Jonathan's shoulders sagged. I spoke to a family court official I knew. I told him Parker was unstable. I asked him to look into an old incident, some fight he got into at the group home. They reopened it, turned it into an assault review. It was enough to keep him under supervision, enough to slow him down. Vera stared at him, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. You ruined his life. I didn't ruin anything. Jonathan insisted, but there was no conviction behind the words. I was trying to protect you. I thought he was dangerous. I thought you'd see reason if you caged him. Her voice broke. If you broke us on purpose? Jonathan's reply died on his lips. Their relationship, already fragile, fractured beyond repair in that moment. Something inside Vera shut down completely. She turned away, walked out of the townhouse without looking back, and didn't answer when Jonathan called after her. He stood in the doorway long after she'd gone, the truth of his actions settling over him like a suffocating fog. 3 days later, the rain hit Boston hard, sleek roads, blurred headlights, the kind of weather that demanded caution. But Vera, still trembling from anger and heartbreak, rode anyway. She told herself she just needed air, needed movement, needed anything that made her feel alive. On a narrow curve outside Cambridge, her back tire slid across a glossy sheet of water. The motorcycle fishtailed. Vera tried to correct the angle, but the bike skidded sideways, metal grinding against asphalt. In one violent instant, she was thrown across the lane, slamming into the guardrail before everything went black. A passerby called 911. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Female, mid-20s, unresponsive, weak pulse, move. The siren wailed through the wet streets as they sped toward Massachusetts General Hospital, the same hospital where she had once healed, once kissed Parker, once believed life could unfold gently. This time, she arrived surrounded by frantic voices and machines. She was rushed into trauma care, intubated, wired to monitors that fought to keep her heart steady. When Evelyn and Jonathan arrived, they were met not with polite greetings, but with the cold truth of their daughter's fragility. Seeing her pale, motionless, hooked to life support machines, something in both of them shattered. Evelyn wept openly for the first time in years. Jonathan gripped the doorway, unable to breathe. They had spent so long trying to control her life, and now they were terrified they might lose it. Parker Hayes never expected freedom to feel this strange. After years of supervised attention, endless evaluations, mandatory counseling, and the constant weight of a case built on lies, the review board suddenly reversed course. A new investigator uncovered inconsistencies, interventions that should never have happened, signatures that didn't match, accusations that lacked factual grounding. The system had finally admitted what Parker always knew. He never should have been detained in the first place. "You're cleared," the officer said, sliding a folder across the table. "You're free to go." The words didn't feel real. Parker blinked at them, numb, until the door buzzed open and sunlight hit his face for the first time without restrictions attached. He stepped onto the street with only a duffel bag and a life that no longer fit the shape of the years stolen from him. He went straight to Elaine Foster's small house in Dorchester, the closest thing he had to family after his mother died. Elaine opened the door and froze, hand rising to her mouth. "Parker," she whispered. "Dear God, is it really you?" He hugged her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of lavender and laundry detergent. For a moment, the world felt anchored again, but Elaine pulled back, studying him with an expression that made his stomach twist. "There's something you need to know," she said quietly. Her words came out in pieces. "Vera, the accident, critical condition, Massachusetts General Hospital, life support." Parker didn't remember leaving the house. He didn't remember the train ride or running through traffic or pushing past startled pedestrians. All he knew was the pounding of his heart and the sharp, sickening fear that he was already too late. When he burst through the doors of MGH, Jonathan and Evelyn stood in the hallway outside the ICU, pale and hollow, speaking in low tones with a neurologist. The doctor's expression was grave. "We need to prepare you both," he said gently. "Her brain activity has been declining. If there's no improvement soon, we'll have to discuss end-of-life decisions." End-of-life decisions. The phrase hit Parker like a fist. Before either parent could stop him, he shoved past them. "Hey, you can't go in there," a nurse shouted. But Parker didn't care. He slammed his shoulder into the ICU door until it gave way, stumbling into the room where Vera lay motionless beneath the rhythm of machines and tubes. Her face was impossibly pale, her hair brushed aside neatly by someone trying to bring comfort to a body that might never respond again. He reached her bedside and grabbed her hand, still warm, still hers. "Vera!" he whispered, voice cracking. "It's me. I'm here. I'm so sorry I never left you. I never moved on. I never stopped loving you. Please, please come back." Jonathan and Evelyn appeared behind him, breathless, security guards arriving seconds later. But before anyone could drag him away, something unexpected happened. The monitors beeped. A faint spike, then another. The neurologist, entering mid-commotion, froze. "Wait. Everyone stop." Parker held Vera's hand tighter, leaning close enough that only she could hear the tremor in his voice. "Fight. Please. Don't leave me again." Her fingers twitched. Tiny, barely perceptible, but real. The room fell silent. The monitor lights jumped again, higher this time. The neurologist stepped forward, astonishment breaking through his professional calm. "She's responding." To him. Parker didn't hear the doctor's disbelief or the nurse's frantic calls for more equipment. He only saw the faint movement beneath Vera's eyelids, the unmistakable sign of a life refusing to slip away now that someone she loved had finally reached her. "Vera!" he whispered, forehead pressed lightly to her hand. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time since the accident, hope filled the room. Unexpected, impossible, undeniable. Vera surfaced slowly, as though rising through layers of heavy water. At first there were only sounds, soft beeps, the whisper of air through tubes, footsteps fading in and out. Then came light, blurry and fractured. And finally a voice, low, familiar, trembling with hope. "Vera? Can you hear me?" She blinked. The world sharpened just enough for her to see Parker Hayes sitting beside her bed, eyes rimmed red, shoulders tense with days of exhaustion. He looked older than she remembered, sharper around the edges, jaw set like someone who had endured a lifetime in her absence. And yet his expression, the second he saw her looking back, softened into something that almost broke her. "Hi," he whispered. A tear slid from her eye before she realized she was crying. Her throat ached when she tried to speak, but Parker squeezed her hand gently. "It's okay. Don't push yourself. You're safe." She closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple fact that he was real, alive, here, the man she had mourned in silence, the man she believed had betrayed her, the man she had been forced to let go. He was holding her hand like he had never left. Hours later, after nurses confirmed she was stable, Jonathan and Evelyn entered the room. For the first time in Vera's memory, her father looked fragile. His expensive suit hung awkwardly, his face drawn and tired, his eyes carrying remorse heavy enough to bow his posture. "Vera," he said quietly, "there are things I need to tell you." She stiffened. Parker released her hand only long enough to step aside, but remained close, an anchor she could feel even without touching him. Jonathan took a breath that shook on the way out. "I was wrong about Parker, about everything. I interfered in ways no father should. I manipulated a juvenile investigator. I had an old fight reopened, so they detain him. His voice cracked. I lied to you. To everyone. I thought I was protecting you. But I destroyed lives instead. Evelyn looked away, ashamed but silent, as if confronting the consequences of years spent prioritizing status over humanity. Vera swallowed, her voice faint but steady. The photos of him and Shelby? Jonathan closed his eyes. Staged. I paid Shelby. I told her it was for your own good, that he was beneath you. Silence swallowed the room. Parker's jaw flexed, the quiet fury beneath his calm unmistakable. But when he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, measured in a way that made the admission cut even deeper. You cost me years, he said. My record, my freedom, my life. I lost everything because you didn't think your daughter could make her own choices. Jonathan lowered his head. I know, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. Parker didn't respond, not with forgiveness and not with further anger. He simply stepped back, allowing father and daughter the space he didn't want to control. After they left, Vera lay quietly, staring at the ceiling, tears slipping down her temples. The truth was shattering, too big to hold inside her bruised body. I'm so sorry, Parker said softly. That wasn't your fault, she whispered. Still, he murmured, brushing a stray hair from her cheek. I'm here now. For as long as you'll have me. The days that followed were grueling. Vera endured surgeries, physical therapy, and moments when her courage cracked beneath the weight of pain and loss. Some nights she broke down entirely, sobbing into the quiet darkness. But every morning, Parker was there, steady, patient, unshaken. He became the constant she rebuilt herself around. Piece by fragile piece, she began to live again. 3 years passed quietly, not in dramatic leaps, but in steady, deliberate steps, each one carrying Vera further from the shadows of her past and closer to the life she had once believed impossible. She and Parker married in a small ceremony at a historic chapel overlooking the Charles River, surrounded only by Elaine, a handful of close friends, and, after much soul-searching, her parents. There were no extravagant floral arches, no society photographers, no seating charts curated to impress Boston's elite. It was intimate, gentle, and profoundly theirs. Married life suited them in ways neither had expected. They settled into a modest townhouse in Cambridge, one filled with mismatched furniture, motorcycle helmets by the door, and sunlight that spilled across their kitchen table every morning. They hosted dinners for friends, spent weekends exploring back roads on 2 wheels, and allowed themselves to grow, side by side, without the constant weight of fear or separation. For Parker, freedom became more than a legal status. It softened his posture, steadied his voice, and allowed him to imagine a future without bracing for it to collapse. For Vera, healing meant learning to trust her own choices again, to accept that trauma didn't vanish but could be carried with strength instead of shame. Her relationship with her parents transformed slowly, cautiously. Jonathan attended every therapy session she invited him to. He took accountability, not in grand speeches, but in consistent, humble actions. He worked with legal advocates to repair what he could of Parker's record, wrote letters of apology, and never once deflected blame. Evelyn changed too in quieter, but no less meaningful ways. She stopped evaluating the world through social hierarchies and began showing up unannounced with homemade soups, warm sweaters she knit herself, or simply the willingness to sit beside her daughter without imposing expectations. Some wounds remained tender, but the distance between them gradually shrank into something survivable, and eventually something hopeful. In the spring of their 3rd year of marriage, Vera found herself back at Massachusetts General Hospital, the same place that had witnessed so many of her life's turning points. But this time, she wasn't there as a broken body on life support, nor as a grieving girl, clinging to hope. She arrived in the maternity ward, hand in hand with Parker. Contractions tightening around her like waves. Labor was long, exhausting, and emotional. But when Vera finally heard the sharp, new cry of her newborn daughter, everything else fell away. Parker kissed her forehead, his voice cracking as he whispered, "She's here? She's really here." Hours later, after nurses finished their checks and the room grew quiet, Jonathan and Evelyn stepped inside. They paused at the doorway, overwhelmed by the sight of their daughter sitting upright in a hospital bed, a warm bundle wrapped in pink nestled against her chest. "Would you like to meet your granddaughter?" Vera asked softly. Jonathan approached first, hands trembling, not from age, but from the weight of everything that had led them here. When Vera placed the infant in his arms, his breath hitched audibly. He looked down at the tiny face, impossibly new and impossibly forgiving. "She's beautiful," he whispered, tears gathering in his eyes. "Absolutely beautiful." Evelyn stood beside him, resting a gentle hand on her husband's back as she leaned close, the awe on her face quiet and sincere. For the first time in decades, the tension between them seemed to dissolve in the warmth of new life. Parker wrapped an arm around Vera, kissing the side of her head as she rested against him. The past, the grief, the betrayals, the years lost, no longer defined them. It lived behind them, softened by time and truth, overshadowed by the future now swaddled in Jonathan's shaking hands. As the baby blinked up at her grandparents, the room felt full in a way none of them had ever known. After years of damage, distance, and pain, this was the beginning that finally felt whole.